So, Bill, before we talk about the activity we've seen this week in the Senate Banking Committee, give us some background on the fines that Wells Fargo paid, the employees that they fired, and just, I guess, more broadly, this ongoing fraud that seems to have been perpetrated for years and years.
Okay, so what they have admitted to, and this was not identified by a government investigation. They were allowed to hire an outside audit firm, and those things always do the same thing. Hey, we found the following problems, and nobody in senior management did anything wrong. So, the first thing is we haven't had a real investigation. So this 2 million felony number is the lowest possible number for the felonies. Second
Wait,
thing
I'm sorry,
is,
2 million, what do you mean by 2 million felonies? I mean, I'm not sure that our audience is even aware of what felonies were committed.
okay, so to really back up, Wells Fargo uses the name Wells Fargo, but it's really a Midwestern bank that acquired Wells Fargo, Norwest, and decided the Wells Fargo name had a better national cachet. So that Midwestern bank has been known for 20 years for emphasizing this cross-selling is the euphemism. That if we get you into a branch, we don't just get you a deposit, we try to sell you a whole bunch of other products that you don't need and shouldn't have. Starting with credit cards and then overdraft protection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So they've been doing that for 20 years, and the person in charge of the branch network has been doing this for 25 years. She's the one, despite overseeing this thing, which as I will explain, had at least 2 million felonies created, was allowed to leave with a golden parachute of over $100 million and was cited by the CEO, Mr. Stumpf, as being the very model of what a Wells Fargo officer should be. Right? And the CEO, Stumpf, also goes back to this Midwestern place. In 2013, because of whistleblowers within the bank and customer complaints, the LA Times broke this story. So 3 years ago, this was public. The LA County District Attorney, which has very few resources and very limited expertise in elite white-collar crimes, particularly in finance, started an investigation in 2015 and credits the LA Times for bringing this to his attention, which really means he's crediting the whistleblowers and the customers who made these complaints. So we've known about this stuff for at least 3 years. We learned yesterday in the congressional testimony, the Senate hearing, for the first time, that the federal agency created by Dodd-Frank that's supposed to protect consumers, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, CFPB, started its so-called investigation because of a whistleblower complaint. The pressure of the LA County District Attorney investigation led senior management at Wells Fargo to hire one of the big four accounting firms to do a supposed investigation. Now, as I said, these investigations always target the lower level people and say that the top people were just fine. And
so, Bill, if I can do an analogy here, this would be basically if somebody reported to you that I was perpetrating an assault on them, and you said to me, "Hey, will you check that out? Are you perpetrating an assault on them?" And I come back and I say, "No, not me. It's actually just my I've got a finger twitch, and that's what's doing it, basically, right? I mean,
yeah, the analogy would be that it was just my guy that cuts my yard, my lawn,
right.
and he just went out on a rogue thing and attacked somebody. When in fact you created incentive systems that said he'd be fired unless he beat the hell out of people. Yeah, that would be analogous. Okay,
go ahead. Sorry.
And so you're absolutely right that this is insane. This is also absolutely the norm, which is, of course, why it's insane. And this is why we have 8 years after the collapse of Lehman Brothers, massive fraud after massive fraud after massive fraud, because no one's being held accountable who is elite. Instead, they're getting literally, in this case, hundreds of millions of dollars for putting in place incentive systems designed to produce exactly what happened, which is to say, as I say, at least 2 million felonies, and then, as I will explain, tens of millions of abusive sales, which are being ignored, by the way. The abusive sales are being ignored. So they hire this outside audit firm. The outside audit firm says, well, we found that there were 2 million accounts that were created at Wells Fargo without the permission or knowledge of the customer. Okay, so this is 500,000 credit cards and 1.5 million more traditional accounts.
That's unbelievable.
No,
I mean,
totally believable.
It's totally believable, but it's also, I guess the word I'm looking for, it's shocking. I mean, 2 million fraudulent accounts set up for people who did not authorize them, that basically just the people working there had these people's name and information. And so how did it work? How did the incentive system work in Wells Fargo? So I'm a guy.
This is good to understand because it's being misrepresented in many cases in the media. This is not a case, unlike the financial crisis frauds, where the loan brokers would get substantial amount of money, up to $20,000 for helping to originate masses of fraudulent loans. So you get $20,000 for a single fraudulent mortgage, right? Here, the employees are very low paid. Many of them, the last thing we have is that about 30% of bank tellers' families have a member on some kind of federal financial assistance, right? So, and the bonuses they got for opening these accounts were tiny. So that was not what was going on from their perspective. What was going on from their perspective is they would be fired if they failed to meet these quotas. And these are ultra-aggressive quotas that cannot be met, honestly, right? The only way you can meet them is to sell enormous numbers. And again, now we're talking tens of millions of products to people that shouldn't have them. I mean like third credit cards to people who are already maxed out on credit cards, whether it's just going to ruin their life and such. And, of course, you would not only be unemployed, you would have a record, an employment record that said you were fired for cause by a bank, which would be devastating to your ability to ever work again, particularly in this industry. So it was pure extortion of the employees. Now, there were big bonuses. Indeed, there were gigantic bonuses, but those didn't go to low-level officers. Those went to the most senior people. And so,
all right,
as
Bill
I
Black,
said,
this is a good place for us to take a break. So to be clear, these aren't incentives. These are basically a system of punishment and coercion and, like you call it, extortion on some level to get these people to push these products that they could never meet these bonuses because, frankly, the people who were working there in many respects were desperate. But we've got to take a break. We're talking to Bill Black about the real story behind this Wells Fargo fine and grilling this week in front of the Senate. We're going to take a quick break. Sam Seder at Ring of Fire Radio.